Erev Tov, good evening, everyone. Tonight we are going to learn about different halachot having to do with uh, types of porridge, something that's called a chavitza, not chavita, which is like eggs, like omelet, but chavitza. It's some sort of a dish. We're going to talk about it tonight, talking about its berachot, and then we're also going to talk about what happens if you take bread and you recook it. And like the famous example is French toast, right? You're taking bread, a slice of toast bread, and then you're adding eggs and frying it in oil, and like you're going through the cooking process again, a second time. Not through baking again, that's just like toasting it more, but like some other way of cooking it. So that's the sugya that we're going to learn tonight. It's a somewhat complicated Gemara simply because there's two opinions of how it's learned, but we're going to have some fun tonight. You can see my background tonight. I got just last week, I decided to do with rice. Let's see how long I could keep up this theme. It's a good thing we passed the third parak that had to do with like praying near going to the bathroom and urine and stuff like that. And I only thought of this idea afterwards. Otherwise, I don't know if you guys would still be here. But here on my right, I think I have this is like chavitza. It's a porridge dish. This is like an oatmeal. It's some sort of grains that has become into a dish, which is maaseh kedera. This is the beracha. On this we spoke about on oatmeal is mezonot. And on my left shoulder, my yetzer hatov, my yetzer hara. On my left shoulder, what I have here is French toast, right? And so French toast, we know how to. The process is you're taking bread. It's actual bread, and then you're cooking it or really frying it a second time. And that's a process where you add eggs to it and then like you add oil and you fry it. So you're recooking bread. Tonight we're going to talk about the process of what's the beracha when you take bread and you recook it. Let's go. Gemara, Masechet Berachot, Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Bet. Amar Rava. I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Let's put this on Do Not Disturb. Let's have this. Share screen. I'll tell you exactly where we're starting as soon as we start. Share and share. Zoom. Okay, here we go. All right. Amar Rava. So this, if you're looking at the R scroll, it's 37B, what? 37B 1. Is it? I don't have it in front of me. So say, what is it? In the middle of the left column? Okay, in the middle of the right column. Amar Rava. Hi rihata de hakla'eh. There's a dish that's called rihata. This rihata is this dish that we're going to talk about. It's called chavitza, and this chavitza, if you look at footnote 10, it's like this is another name for a chavitz cooked in a pot. We're going to talk about this, but it's essentially some form of a porridge. Okay, now this porridge, there's different ways you can make it. Let's say you want to make oatmeal. There's really like you have oats in there, right? But there's like one other key ingredient, or maybe two other key ingredients. What is it? What is it? Water for sure. And it's a matter of like how sweet you want to make it. You could add like maple syrup, for example, right? That's like some or honey. So there's two types of oatmeal. There's oatmeal where it's like you're being healthy, and the second type of oatmeal is like you're not trying to be healthy, and you just like it's actually mostly sugar or mostly syrup or mostly oatmeal. That's what we're going to talk about here. There's two types of people. Now, the idea is that the sugar, the honey is more expensive. So this dish, this porridge, this rihata, there's the way that villagers would make it and people in the city would make it. Villagers would go heavy on the grain, not so sweet because the honey is more expensive. The grain is less expensive. In the cities, they would be sweeter. They're more modern. They make things more unhealthy, more colorful, more food coloring. Like that's what happens. You're living in a more expensive life, you make it more unhealthy because you can. So this is going to be the two types of this rihata. It's like a porridge. Let's go ahead and see it. Hi rihata de chakla'eh. With regard to the blessing on this rihata villagers, the mapshebe kimcha. They in the village they add a lot of flour to it. Why are they adding so much flour? Because they can't. Meaning it's heavy on the flour, very light on the sweetener. So mevarech borei min mezonot. So the beracha is going to be borei min mezonot. My tama. Why? The smida ikar, because the flour is the ikar. It's the primary ingredient, right? If you have oatmeal and you just put a sprinkle of sugar on it, or a sprinkle of cinnamon on it, or a sprinkle of honey on it, it's oatmeal, it's mezonot. The mechuzah, but this rihata in the city of like where city dwellers are, they have more money. They do not add a lot of flour to it, which really means that they're adding a lot of sugar. It's mostly like a honey dish with some sprinkling in some flour. You know, some people they like will have coffee with a little bit of sugar, and then some people will have sugar with a little bit of coffee on top. That's exactly what this is. This in the city, they're having a little bit of sugar with some oatmeal on top. So the beracha, you're eating honey. It's sha'akol. Why? Dusha ikar, because the honey is the primary ingredient. But then Rava said, this is where Rava started, by saying, depending on what's the majority, is it the oatmeal that's the majority, or is it the honey that's the majority? If the oatmeal is majority, you're going to say mezonot. If the honey is the majority, you're going to say shakol. But then Rava refined his statement because of a rule that we know. Rava afterwards reconsidered and said, iti ve'iti borem min mezonot. Both cases are going to be borem min mezonot. Why? The Rav Shmuel the Amit Arbaya, because both Rav and Shmuel say, this is the line, it's the third shiur in a row we're saying it. Kol sheyesh bo mechameshet aminim, any food that contains within it one of the 5 species of grain, even if it's the minority, the beracha becomes mezonot. So therefore, if you're having an oatmeal, if you're having a porridge, if you're having a flour with honey or with maple syrup dish, it doesn't matter whether you're primarily grain or you're primarily sweetener, beracha is going to be mezonot regardless.
That's it's called.
Correct. Because otherwise you have the hakoses the chita situation, which I have some updates from last week, but I'm not going to go there unless we have time. Yeah.
What if it's not 5 grams? Grits, corn.
So grits, I guess if it's corn-based, then you go by what the ikar is, what the majority is. In general, the rule is that when you have 2 possible brachot in a mixture, you go by what is primary. So in the situation where it's heavily the honey, then the beracha is going to be sha'akol. The exception to this rule that you go by the primary is if it contains one of the 5 grains. If it contains one of the 5 grains, it becomes mezonot, even if that is the secondary or tertiary ingredient. The exception to the exception is if the grain is there for as a binding agent or structural and is there just for form, then you don't say mezonot on it. But that's exactly it. Once you tell me that you're making this grits out of corn, so then you follow the normal law. If it's going to be shakol, it's going to be shakol. Yeah.
If it's 2 items, but the one that's not the majority, that reading for the taste of that, is that affected or not?
Like you mean like wheat and barley?
Saying like 2 non-mezonot.
2 non-mezonot. Oh, okay, got it. You're asking an excellent question. Your question is, what about a situation in which my primary ingredient is not the most? Chicken and avocado. I didn't know that. There's more avocado.
Let's say
Oh, they go heavy on the avocado, and you have a little bit of chicken. Like, yeah, you know where you're gonna have this. You're gonna have this with like sushi, where like you have a small little piece of fish, and then like it's a bunch of rice and a bunch of this and a bunch of that.
But it only applies to sushi, right? If you have a dish with chicken and avocado, you say bracha on each, huh?
So if it's separate, if the items are like very easily separatable, like you said, you have chicken and avocado, so you say 2 separate brachot. Yes, you say 2 separate brachot. If you're having a salad, and in the salad you have like grapes, like a fruit, but then there's also ha'adama, you could very easily pick out the grape and say ha'etz, and then then say Adam on the next thing. And then if there's a crouton in there, you could say separate brachot because they're not really mixed. But when you're talking about an oatmeal, you don't have to like pull out the blueberry and wipe it down and then say you don't have to do that. It's a mixed dish. It's a mixed dish. So your question, it's a machloket. Okay? Richard, your question, Shlomo's question is, what happens in a situation where my primary ingredient is not the majority, it's the minority? And like You could have like a lot of filler. I don't know. You're saying this example of like chicken and avocado. I imagine, let's say, for example, you have I don't know, like steak with mashed potatoes, where you're heavy on the mashed potatoes and you have a small little piece of steak. So like, let's say it's all mixed together. The meat on the inside is really the primary thing. That could be a situation. Machloket. Machloket. Simple understanding is you could go by the ikar, by what's most important. Although I have seen that it goes by, it's actually one of the footnotes of the art scroll on the previous page where it goes by volume measurement. I think they even quote the machloket. All right. You're good? Everyone with me so far? Yeah.
I heard if the name of the dish is, let's say, open, right? Yeah. But it's not necessarily open as well, right? You still make a hot and say something. Maybe that's not a good example, but maybe, for example, let's say you have this, the rich, right? Right, and it's primarily
Sugar?
sugar. And let's say we didn't have that rule that even if there's Mezonot,
Like he said, with corn.
right?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I think what you're, if I understand correctly, you're saying if it's called one thing but it's actually something else, does it make a difference? I would say you go by the ingredients, not by its name.
The name is wrong.
The name is irrelevant. The name is a marketing thing. You know, it's just a marketing thing. Okay, let's go. Amar Rav Yosef. It's going to be a machloket about chavitza. This chavitza is going to lead us to what I have in my photo of like this porridge type of dish or French toast. But look at the ingredients of this porridge. This is how you make it, chavitza. You're taking not oatmeal, but you're baking bread. So you went and you baked some pita bread. You go to your thing, you buy pita bread, and then you take your pita bread and then you chop it up into little cubes. And then you take your pita bread and you throw it into a soup. And it gets this like texture of some sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a puree type of thing. It's like a moist, it becomes like a soft soup. Now, it's going to be a machloket between Rashi and others if you're actually cooking this bread or you're just chucking the bread into the soup. Like, are you actually taking this bread and putting it on the fire? Like you have a soup dish and you put bread in this, like almost like matzo ball soup. Imagine you made like gondi with, or like you're making like a matzo ball soup, but you're taking a pita bread and you're throwing the pita bread into the pot of soup, in which case you would be re-cooking the bread. You baked bread and now you're cooking it. There's different types of cooking, right? Baking. What's baking? In the oven with heat, cooking it with heat. What is cooking? Putting it in a pot with water, exactly. Then there could be something else where you're grilling on the fire, which is a little bit different than in the oven. That could really be like called roasting. Roasting is another form. And then there's another form called frying, where now you use oil involved. So you have different types of cooking. We're going to right now talk about someone takes bread, bakes the bread, then takes the bread and puts it into a soup. That soup, machloket, whether you're cooking it, meaning you're putting in the soup on the pot, on the fire, or you're just throwing it into your pot, in your dish. Rashi says you're actually cooking it in, let's go with that, and Shulchan Aruch is going to argue. But we'll start off with Rashi. Rashi saying you take these pieces, you're basically taking croutons, you're making your pita bread, throwing it into the pot, giving it some sort of a texture. Chavitza. Amar Rav Yosef, hi Chavitza, the it be perurim kezayit. This is what he says. He's saying it's going to depend on how big your chunks of bread are. If each chunk of bread is a kezayit, an olive size, which let's call it about an ounce, it's not really an ounce of weight, but it's an ounce of water displacement. Let me explain what I mean by water displacement. If you want to speak about an ounce of let's say bread, you could put it on a scale. You'd be measuring what the weight is, but that's not how these calculations are done. It's actually you want to get the volume. So how can you get the volume measurement? It's called by water displacement. You take basically that shot glass, that you know the kiddush cup that they give you, that's a 1 ounce cup, and essentially you put in 1 ounce worth, or you filled up 1 ounce worth of liquid volume with pita bread. and then you see how much it could be. So I don't know how much you're talking about, like that much maybe, Like it's not a large amount. It's called kezayit because it's the size of an olive. So you fill up that shot glass, you take some bread, you put it in, maybe like that much bread. Maybe that much bread. Something like that. I don't know. Something like that. That's called a kezayit. So now this is what Rav Yosef is saying. Rav Yosef says this guy is taking pita bread, cutting it up, putting it in a pot, cooking it. And he's saying, does the bread dissolve or is it still intact? If the bread has pieces of a kezayit, then it's bread. It's bread. It has. If it's the size of a kezayit, you started off as bread. You put it in the pot. It's still bread. You say Hamotzi, and afterwards you say Hamotzi. It's bread. So what? You took your bread and you put it in the soup. It's bread. But the late be perurin kezayit, if it does not have the size of a kezayit, meaning essentially it dissolved. It became insignificant, it became small. The bread status changed, it became Mezonot. And afterwards you say a beracha of ala michia. Now, I told you what Rashi said. I want to just see where you have that footnote because we're gonna see it differently. Look at footnote number 12. Rashi in footnote number 12 says a cooked dish made with small pieces of bread. Okay, but the key word here that what Rashi is saying is that it's cooked. According to Tosafot, it's not cooked. Let me see footnote 14. Let's see footnote 14. As Tosafot and Rabbeinu understand. Okay. No, not this one. See footnote 34. Okay, you know what? Let's wait until we get up to it. Okay, here we go. So now, so far so good. Rav Yosef taught us a rule. Rav Yosef's rule is you take a soup, you add like a broth, you add pieces of bread to it. The bracha of this soup is going to depend on the size of the pieces. We could call them croutons. It's going to be the size of this bread crouton. If it's over a kezayit, hamotzi, it still has the status of bread. Less than a kezayit, he viewed it as been dissolved and it's mezonot. Now he's going to give us a proof. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef is going to defend himself. Mina la. How do I know this? Titania, I'm going to use a breita. What's the breita? The breita is talking about someone that is coming to bring a korban mincha at the Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash, there was different types of korbanot. You could bring korbanot out of like animals, like a four-legged sheep, goat, cow, etc. You can bring it out of a bird, like a pigeon or a dove, or you can bring it out of some sort of flour. The flour could be that it's actually baked. It could be that it's raw flour. It could be that it's been fried. So someone is going to bring a korban mincha. Korban mincha is flour. Someone's coming with a korban mincha, comes to the Beit HaMikdash, goes to Yerushalayim, Omer, Baruch Shechianu v'kiyimanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. First of all, he hasn't been there in a while, so he says the beracha of Shechianu. Okay? Which is amazing. Didn't know this. You go bring a korban, you haven't done it in a while, you say Shechianu. Others say that no, it's not that he says it, it's the Kohen that says the beracha of Shechianu, because the Kohen is only doing this once or twice a year with their rotations. So it's been 6 months, so the Kohen says Shechianu. Whatever it is, that's not the point. Nitalan ve'ochlan. Now the Kohen takes this korban mincha and it's time for him to eat it. Mivarech hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So the bracha is going to be hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So let's just talk about what the Kohen does exactly. Kohen. We have two Kohanim here. Kohen. What's the process called kemitzah? Do you know? You don't know kemitzah? Very good. Not this. But this. Okay. So you're gonna take. Let's say there's a bowl of flour. If it's raw flour, take the bowl of flour. This is going to be, there's a kemitzah amount, 3 fingers worth, that the Kohen scoops with his hand. He shouldn't take more, shouldn't take less. So he fills it up and then uses his thumb. I want to get this into the diagram also in the Zoom. Uses his thumb. Let's do this, just so that they could all see me. Kohen goes, hey, this is my bowl right here, right? Goes, takes in the flour with your thumb, make sure there's no residue on the right side. With your pinky, make sure there's no residue on the left side, or vice versa. It's the right hand, so the opposite. and then this is going to get burned on the Mizbeach, and the rest the Kohen eats. Now let's say we're talking about a Korban Mincha that has been fried already. Okay? So this flour has already been fried, then they would have to take it and break it up into pieces so that the Kohen could do kemitzah. You're basically they make matzah, they take this matzah, they crush it, and then the Kohen is going to do the kemitzah with the pieces of matzah, going to burn it, and then he gets to eat the rest. What beracha does the Kohen make? Well, you fried it. So what's the beracha? You cooked it, you made it. Beracha, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Because this is already a form of bread. That's what we're learning here. Mevarech hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Assuming you're using some water as well. No. You're right if it's very oily. But you're going to say hamotzi lechem min haaretz. V'tani ala, and the Braita, on this the Mishnah says, V'kulan potetan kezayit. Now what we're learning is, when they take this bread that they're going to break up into pieces so that the Kohen could do kemitzah, each of those pieces they target to be a kezayit. So each of those pieces are a kezayit, and he's going to take a scoop, but the rest of it is going to be pieces of kezayit. And what beracha does the Kohen make? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So there's this process which afterwards it seems like it's getting cooked afterwards, and even though it's getting cooked afterwards, since it is a kezayit, it's going to have the status of bread. Amar le Abaye, Abaye says to him, if that's the case, the fact that it's a kezayit is a machloket. One opinion says a kezayit. The other opinion, Tana Deberi Yishmael, says you actually have to regrind it back into a flour. It's like, you know what matzah meal is? What is matzah meal? They take matzah and they grind it back into a flour. So that's what you have to do. Are you going to tell me that the beracha there is not hamotzi? And if you want to say it's not, but we learned in a Braita, in a situation in which you take, somebody's got to say something. Thank you. I'm sorry, I wasn't sharing the screen. I'll go back.
But with that, they took the flour like this, and then they baked it.
Afterwards, they either they bake it or they fry it. Yeah, but it's not chametz. Everything in the Beit Hamikdash was never chametz. What we're saying is, okay, let's see it and I'll answer your question.
It's maybe a design.
Hold on, let's see it. Let's see if I answer your question. Amarle Abaye. Abaye says, okay, let's go back. Rav Yosef told us that as long as the pieces are kezayit and you're putting it into the soup, it's hamotzi. So Rav Yosef says, how do I know? The Tani, because we learned in Braita. Someone goes to Yerushalayim, gives it to the Kohen. The Kohen's going to say, Baruch Shechianu Kivyanu. He says it's Shechianu Natan Le'ochlan. Then he takes up the kemitzah. Then he takes the rest and he's going to eat it. He's going to make a beracha of hamotzi on this. So now he's going to make a beracha of hamotzi. After he has recooked it, he's recooked this. He's going to say hamotzi. And on it says v'kulan potetan kezayit. And we learned that the size of each of these pieces is a kezayit. When they break it up, they like make a korban. They make a korban mincha, machavat. They make it like a sheet. Then they break it up so that it's pieces of a kezayit. And then he's going to cook it again. And now you're cooking something a second. You're cooking bread a second time. And as long as you have the size of a kezayit, you say hamotzi. It's telling us the beracha is hamotzi. Abaye attacks him and says, Amar le Abaye. Abaye says to him, Ela me'ata. According to that, the Tana, the Beri Yishmael, the Amar por Chanan Shemach Zion Sotan. According to the Bei Rabbi Ishmael, they were actually shredding it, grinding it even less than a kezayit. And even they have the Mishnah that says you have to say hamotzi. Are you going to tell me that according to them you don't say hamotzi? And maybe you're going to say, yeah, you don't say hamotzi if you make it so small. But we learned in a Braita. Let's say there's a situation where someone gets matzah and he has, on the night of Pesach, how much matzah do you have to eat? Let's start simply with one kezayit. You have to eat a kezayit. Okay, yes, you're right. But let's just say you have to eat a kezayit. Let's say you have a third of a kezayit of wheat matzah, a third of kezayit of barley matzah, and a third of kezayit of spelt matzah. And then also, just because like you wanted to have fun, you had a third of a kezayit of wheat bread, third of a kezayit of barley bread, and third of a kezayit of rye bread. Okay? On Pesach. Now someone's going to eat both of these. Question, is he going to get karet for eating a kezayit of chametz? And second question, is he going to get the mitzvah of, is he going to fulfill the mitzvah of eating a kezayit of matzah? Meaning, if you're creating it out of different materials, less than a kezayit, do you fulfill your mitzvah or not? So the answer is, liket mikulan kezayit achlan. If he takes small pieces of less than a kezayit and he combines it together, im chametzu, if those pieces were chametz, anush karet. You just ate karet. You just ate chametz. And if it's matzah, the person fulfills his obligation. So now, what are you seeing? You're seeing a situation where someone on the night of Pesach is going to be taking small little third kezayit pieces, put it together, and you're going to tell me he fulfilled his mitzvah, which means he ate matzah, which means he could say hamotzi. No, you say hamotzi, matzah, halachic matzah. So it clearly, just because it's less than a kezayit doesn't mean it's not bread. So you, Rav Yosef, are going to say, you know what my proof is? That if you put this chavitza, which is putting bread into a soup, and the pieces have become less than a kezayit, then it's no longer bread. What's my proof? Because by the Kohen, where you're grinding the korban mincha into pieces of a kezayit, you say hamotzi, which means, you see, as long as it's a kezayit, but less than that, you wouldn't say it. They're like, that's not true. I know that if you take small pieces less than a kezayit, put it together, it could actually be the mitzvah of matzah. So Rav Yosef defends himself. He says, you know why in the case of the matzah you fulfill your obligation? If it's less than a kezayit, it's not considered bread. But here the situation is different. Bishe'ersan. Those small pieces of dough, of wheat and barley and spelt, you actually turned it into dough. You mixed it all up, back into a dough, and baked it into a single unified kezayit with 3 different ingredients. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, ema seifa. Hold on, that's not consistent with the language. Because why? Because there's a qualification on this statement. In order to fulfill your mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach, and also in order for someone to transgress eating chametz from the Torah to get karet, they have to not only eat a kezayit of bread or matzah, but they have to eat it within a time limit. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have a kezayit of bread, and I have a nibble right now. 1 hour later, I have another nibble. 1 hour later, I have another nibble. 1 hour later, I have another nibble. So that throughout the day, I ate a kezayit. That is not going to get karet. And that's also not going to fulfill your mitzvah of matzah. Why? Because that's not a single eating. In order to do a single eating, you have to eat it in what's called kedei achilat paras, the amount of time it takes to eat 4 egg volume, which is around 200, what do we say? 216 milliliters of water displacement. Basically, 216 milliliters worth, right? Grams worth, even though it's not a weight, it's a volume displacement. If I have to eat that much, 216 cubic centimeters of bread, but you have to do it within the time of Kedei Achilat Pras, which is machloket. Let's say it's around 4 minutes. Different opinions, but let's say it's around 4 minutes. So now we're just picking up on a small issue here. The Braita tells me that if you take small pieces of bread and combine it, that gets the person chametz. That gets the person karet. Or if you take small pieces of matzah and you combine it, you fulfill your mitzvah of matzah. And Rav Yosef is saying that small pieces of bread are not considered bread. So how do you fulfill your mitzvah of matzah if you're telling me it's not bread? He says, oh, that case, you take those small pieces, you made it into dough and baked it again. So, okay, but just continue reading. It says, as long as you ate those pieces, in 4 minutes. So it's not 8 those pieces, it's that you ate it. You ate your new loaf. That's what it should have said. When it says, as long as he ate them in the time of a span it takes to eat half a loaf, if you made it into dough, instead of saying you ate them, you should have said that as long as you ate it, your new bread. So Rav Yosef now wants to say a different situation. What are we dealing with? There's one extra situation where Rav Yosef will agree that less than a kezayit is still considered bread. What is that? If the bread is still there. What do I mean? I have 3 types of matzah. One matzah that's wheat, one matzah that's spelt, one matzah that's rye. And I take a small piece, a small piece, a small piece, even though this is less than a kezayit, since it's chilling right next to the big piece, this is matzah. This is considered bread because it's coming from a loaf, and the very fact that it's there signifies that you just took a rip off of a piece of bread, but you didn't destroy its status by just breaking it off. So when you have the three together, it's considered bread. So this is how Rav Yosef wants to get himself out of it. In other words, Rav Yosef is going to say that what is the definition of bread if it's getting recooked, as long as it's the size of kezayit. If it's less than a kezayit, it's no longer bread, it's mezonot. And he has to go through hoops of explaining how, if you're having these smaller pieces, it's okay for matzah and it's chametz. And he says, because you had the bigger pieces there. So then that's an exception of the rule. Okay? Now, the Gemara just wants to conclude, but Nick, did I answer your question or no?
Well, and yeah, I mean, the right class, a little different from the example with putting it in the soup.
Okay, very good. So, okay, very good. So this is where Tosafot and Rabbeinu Yonah, they argue with Rashi. And they say to Rashi, no one is recooking these things. You're talking about taking a piece of matzah and breaking off small pieces.
Small pieces. But it's still good. Let's say take bread, small piece of bread. We're going to say shakon.
No, meaning mezonot. So according to Rashi, so that's why Tosafot is saying this situation, this whole case of Chavitza is you're not cooking it. You're taking pieces of bread and you're just like putting it in a broth. And it like dissolves without actually cooking it. You're putting it in a bowl. And that's how Shulchan Aruch is going to hold. So the question is, are you cooking it or not? Up until now, I've been saying Rashi. I want to see this footnote number 34. I'm assuming 34 is going to explain it. Okay? Let's finish this. We'll see footnote 34. We're going to see Shulchan Aruch. Okay? Here we go. So at the end of the day, what's the answer? Remember, now we'll say, not like Rashi. What's the other way of explaining it? Chavitza is a dish where it's like a soup, or it's a milk, or it's like a meat broth, and what you did is you took pieces of bread and you put it in there without cooking it. What's the beracha? Rav Yosef is going to say it depends on only one thing. What does Rav Yosef say it depends on? The size. If it's a kezayit, it's hamotzi, less than a kezayit, mezonot. My havi'ala, so what's the actual law the Gemara says? Amar Rav Sheshat says, I disagree with Rav Yosef. And this is going to be the halacha. Amar Rav Sheshat says, this chavitza that we're talking about, where you're taking bread, pieces of bread, and you're putting it in some sort of a soup without actually recooking it, afagav deleit be perurin kezayit, even though the pieces are so small that the pieces individually are not a kezayit, mevarech alav hamotzi lachem min haaretz, it still is hamotzi. If you take pieces of pita bread, small piece of pita bread, and you put it in your soup, it's still going to be hamotzi. Amar Rava says, there's one rule though. Vehu deika ale torita denahama. As long as it has the appearance of bread. It didn't dissolve. It's not pulverized. And I'll tell you what I imagine. Sometimes I go to a restaurant and I'm gonna eat like a burger or something, and I want to say hamotzi. So you go to the washing station, and when you go to the washing station to do Netilat Yadayim, over there you'll find little chopped off pieces of bread. Like maybe they're taking the hamburger bun and they're chopping it up, so you have the little things, and sometimes they put them in like these little like ketchup cup containers. So you open it up, you take a small piece. Does that look like bread? Yes, it's very clearly bread. So Rava is saying to Rav Sheshat, Rav Sheshat is saying, you take a piece of bread and you put it in soup, it's still bread. You're still going to say hamotzi. And Rava is saying, as long as it's very clearly recognizable as bread. But if it gets to the point where it's like fully dissolved, where now you're looking at it, it looks like just osh. You know what osh is? Osh dandun nashon. You know what that is? Whenever like all of a sudden the baby has a tooth, then all of a sudden you take it and you make some sort of a just like mush. It doesn't look like bread. There's no bread. I mean, they don't make it by putting in bread. But let's say you put bread in and it's soaked and it just becomes a zom. That is not going to be hamotzi. Okay? Let's look at this footnote. Then we're going to look at Shulchan Aruch together, and hopefully it'll answer all of your questions. So footnote number 34, where Rava qualifies by saying that as long as it looks like bread, i.e. the bread pieces did not dissolve to the point that they're no longer recognizable as bread. Fine. Rava's provision refers to pieces that are smaller than a kezayit. But if the pieces are as large as a kezayit, Hamotzi is recited even if they no longer have the appearance of bread. So now basically what we're saying is, according to Rava and Rav Sheshat, if it's big, even if it doesn't look like bread, and if it looks like bread, even if it's not big, if you have one of these two conditions, it's hamotzi. If it's over a kezayit, hamotzi. If it's less than a kezayit but looks like bread, hamotzi. When would you say mezonot? Less than a kezayit, and it doesn't look like bread. Then it becomes mezonot, it becomes like osh. Then it becomes a mezonot dish. Okay? And let's see this footnote, and then we're going to see the halacha and Shulchan Aruch. Rava, here we go. The halacha follows Rav Sheshat and Rava. This is what the halacha follows. Accordingly, hamotzi would be recited on a dish containing cooked or fried pieces of bread the size of a kezayit. If it's cooked or it's fried and it's the size of a kezayit, it's still hamotzi. But not if the pieces are smaller than a kezayit, unless it's still recognizable as bread. The Shulchan Aruch, however, adopts Tosafot's explanation of Chavitza. What's Tosafot's explanation of Chavitza? As pieces of bread that are joined together with meat juice or milk. The meat juice, I really should call this like a broth. It's like a soupy broth where you're putting in a broth or with milk. It's some sort of like a fluid where you're putting the pieces in without cooking it. But they are not actually cooked. Bread pieces that are cooked, however, have lost their definition, and by definition, lost the appearance of bread, and hamotzi is not recited unless they are the size of a kezayit. So now we're going to go according to Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to read for you Shulchan Aruch and Mishnah Berurah, and then I'm going to show you the chart that I made in ChatGPT, and then show you how this day and age our brains are going to stop working because our artificial brains are going to do the thinking for us. Okay, let me show you Shulchan Aruch. Shalom Aleichem. Here, let's see Shulchan Aruch. Go share screen. Wait, no, not the iPad. So, share screen me. I'm pretty sure I clicked that. Okay, now you can see the screen. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, Shulchan Aruch. I'm actually going to start with the Mishnah Berurah. Let me make this a little bit bigger. The Mishnah Berurah gives a very nice explanation to this. Chavitza. That's what we spent our time learning tonight. What is Chavitza? Aktim lazeh asa'if aktama k'tzara. So the Mishnah Berurah says, I'm going to give you a small introduction. By the way, when the Mishnah Berurah does this, it makes everything easy. Sometimes there's a seif in halacha where there's going to be different cases, like 2 cases, 3 cases, 4 cases, and Shulchan Aruch just like says them, and like the conditions are changing, and you don't know what's what. Mishnah Berurah comes in and says, like, let me just explain. There's three groups here, and like this is like the mastery of like it's like a teacher where you're coming in and you're going to say very clearly, you're going to go see this in a second, but let me just explain to you what to look for. There's 3 groups. Vehu diyesh bazeh shlosha ofanim. There's 3 possibilities. Case number 1, you're with me? Pat shepirer lepirurin. A person takes bread, breaks it up into pieces, ubishlo, and cooked it. So case number 1, you took pieces of bread, made little cubes of your pita bread or your challah roll, and you threw it into a pot. You're cooking it. Talui bazeh. So says the Mishnah Berurah, there's going to be one thing that matters. Im ha-perurim gidolim sheyesh behem kezayit. Depends. If the pieces are big, that it's a kezayit, lo nitbatel mehem shem pat, they don't lose the name of bread. Afilu im al-yedei habishul azal alem Torah halachic, even if it no longer looks like bread. Even if it loses the appearance of bread. If it has the size, it's bread. V'im ein bahem kezayit, and if they don't have the size, afilu im nir'eh sheyesh lahem Torah halachic, mevarach b'rei min mezonot. Even if it looks like bread, you say mezonot. The Shem Tavshil Alehem, because it's no longer bread. So, first case, pieces of bread, cooked. The only thing that matters is size. Bigger than a kezayit, hamotzi, even if it doesn't look like bread. Less than a kezayit, mezonot, even if it looks like bread. Okay, so far so good. You take pieces of bread, which initially is baked, and now you cook it. What's the beracha? You tell me. Depends on size, period. Bigger than a kezayit hamotzi, less than a kezayit mezonot. Case number 2. Im lo bishlo. You took bread and you didn't cook it a second time. So now we took pieces of bread and you cut it up. And now you're like taking just like raw croutons. Now what do? Rak shepirer bake'ara. You broke it up into small pieces and you put it in your dish. Not in your pot, but in your dish. Croutons. Okay? They're giving you croutons. You come on a Shabbat table. You say, anyone have croutons at the table? They say no. Are you going to go cook right now? You can't cook at Shabbat. But what are you going to do? You're going to take the bread, break it up into pieces, throw it into your soup. This is like how you like eating your soup. So, Mishnah Berurah perurim yachad al yedei devash o marak. Now, these pieces of bread, it's a very thick, we're talking about a thick texture. It's not really your soup. It's saying like with your honey. It's almost like a cholent. It's like something thick. Like these pieces of bread became like congealed almost. So, this is going to be the sign. Im yesh adayin alehem toar lechem, if you could recognize that it has the appearance of bread, mevarech alehem hamotzi, then it's bread. Afilu im en ba'perin kezayit, even if they don't have the size. Even if it's small, as long as you could recognize it as bread. Take a small piece, put it in, and you look at it like, hey, there's bread in my cholent. If there's bread, hamotzi. V'im en bahem toar lechem, and if it doesn't look like bread, mevarech alehem barim mezonot, is mezonot, ela im ken hayav perin kezayit, unless it's large. V'kanal inyan bishul, it has the size. So in this case, since you didn't cook it, this thing is going to be bread if it has either the size or the appearance. Okay? In the case of cooking, you're like substantially downgrading your bread. You take bread and then you cook it. You're downgrading this thing. So if it's big, hamotzi, but if it's small, even if you could, looks like bread, it's mezonot. Whereas, case number 2 is you're not cooking it, you're just dropping it in your bowl. So this thing is bread. As long as it's big, or it looks like bread, even if it's small, it's bread. When does it become mezonot? If it doesn't look like bread and it's small. Okay, that's case number 2. Case number 3, kishelo bishel. You didn't cook it. V'gam lo nitchaberu hapirurin yachad al yedei mashkeh. And you didn't put it in a soup, which means I just like fidgeting, and I just like fidget, and I break my bread, have a bunch of crumbs everywhere. Now I just have a ton of crumbs of bread. I'm not putting it in soup. It's just my fidget, right? Afilu ima perin dakin kesolet. Even if you can make it so fine that it's like flour. Mevarech alehem hamotzi. It's hamotzi. Why? Because it's bread. L'shem pat alehem. You're taking bread and you're cutting it up. Now you're going to tell me it's not bread? Hello, you're chewing the thing. What? It's not bread. Oh, take a small bit. No, it's mezonot. It's in my mouth. Mezonot. It's bread. Small pieces of bread is still bread. If you're cooking it, it could lose its status, depending on size. If you're mixing it with a soup but not cooking it, it can lose its status if it's small and no longer looks like bread. But if it's not cooked and you're not mixing it, the thing is bread. These are the 3 things that Mishnah Berurah says. What? Third case is you're making croutons for your salad. It's not getting cooked. You're just taking little croutons. You're dropping it into the thing. It's bread. It's still hamotzi. Yes. Oh! Okay, hold on. Do you think it's a coincidence that you guys put butter on your French toast? I usually don't put butter on it. I'm usually not making French toast though. I'm usually getting it from Letterman and I'm just taking it and putting some syrup. They don't have pieces of butter there. Okay, so let's talk about this. What is this? First of all, how is French toast made? If you want, you could go be for your wife, make French toast tomorrow morning, or for your girlfriend. For those of you single, go to make French toast tomorrow morning. So now, how do you make this thing? Okay, you're taking bread. So when it's in the bread thing, it's hamotzi. Then what do? You take it, you put it in egg. You're saying the word batter. Are you put? It's just like you're creating like an egg batter. You make some eggs. You might put salt and pepper in there. Then what do you do with this thing that you dipped in eggs? Fry it, which means you go into a pot with oil, put this thing back on. Is frying the same law as cooking? Because we're talking about cooking, like soup. Cooking with water is it the same thing as frying? Machloket. No, so it's not so clear. Some say that it's Faradim will say la halacha. I'm going to show it to you right now. Yeah, we're going to say Mishnah Berurah says it's the same as cooking. Rav Yosef, I'm going to show you in a moment, says it's the same as cooking. But some have a safek. So according to them, you shouldn't eat French toast unless you're going to say Hamotzi on something else beforehand. But let's assume that frying is another form of cooking. So what did you do? You took bread and you cooked it a second time. Was that case 1, case 2, or case 3 of the Mishnah Berurah? Case 1. Case 1 is when you cooked it. Case 2 is when you just put it in your soup, you mixed it. Case 3 is you just have the dry grindings. So this is a case 1. What's the only thing that matters in case 1? Size. What's the beracha on French toast? It depends on if you have the size of a kezayit. If you have this is a kezayit. If you have those minis, which are maybe it's like a quarter of this, maybe it's Mezonot. Yeah. Just like sometimes, like for the kids, they make like these. No, but yeah, you're right. You're right. When you're making French toast, you're using nice big thick pieces. I'm sorry. You go to the Brit Milah, you look at the bread, you look at the bagels, you're like, I want to wash. Let me just go take some French toast. I hate to burst your bubble. You might as well take the French toast and the bagel because you're saying hamotzi at that point. Yeah, question.
One, kezayit is weight or volume?
Kezayit is going to be different. There's different ways that people calculate it nowadays, but the answer is volume. It's volume measurement. So when we say kezayit, what we're going to say the equivalent of 27 grams of water displacement, which is volume measurement, not the weight. It's not like you take the bread and put it on a scale and weigh 27 grams. Is that you take water in a cup, weigh that 27 grams or 27 milliliters, and the density of water is that 1 gram is equal to 1 milliliter. And then you take the amount of bread that displaces the same amount of water. So it's the volume measurement of 27 cubic centimeters. That is what a kezayit is. It's probably like they say a matchbox, right? That much. Well, usually you're making French toast, and very often your French toast is like thick. Like if you're like even if it's small, but it's a thick piece. Hamotzi. You want to do something fun? What if I cut it up? What if I like on my plate chop it up? No, we're talking about so there's also different opinions as to like at what stage? Like, what if I just take a small bite? Oh, less than a kezayit. No, that's not how it works. Yeah, now like dissolve. Don't get in milk also. Now, no, okay. So the answer is it goes by the time of cooking. The time of cooking. But what's important is that in this first case, it doesn't matter if it looks like bread or not. It only matters if it looks like bread if it's getting mixed. So let's think of an example of it being mixed. Like I said, you're taking your half soup and you're taking your pieces of bread and you're putting it inside of your soup. So what's this case number 2? It's going to be hamotzi if either it's a kezayit or it looks like bread, and even if it's less than a kezayit. It's harder to remove the status of bread the less that you do. So if you don't do anything to it, you're not, that's our third case, you're not removing the status. In the middle case where you're not cooking it, but you're mixing it, it's still bread unless it's really small and doesn't look like bread. And in the case of if you're actually cooking it or frying it, as we're saying, it's still bread unless it's small. If it's small, then it's no longer going to be bread. Question. So if you were to cut the pieces of bread before you cooked it into small pieces, it would be mezonot. So if you want to be conscious of saying mezonot on French toast, just chop them up into very small pieces. If you chop them up into very small, almost make like a scrambled French toast, then it's going to be mezonot. The halacha talks about what happens if some of the pieces are a kezayit and some of them are not. So it's going to be hamotzi, but you should just say hamotzi on one of the bigger pieces. Yeah.
Case, so you cut up part you make Mezonot. If you eat sour, you say
Relax, Josh. I can only do one topic at a time. Josh is not talking about another topic of being kovea seuda. We're going to get into it. Be'ezrat Hashem, I believe it's going to be the next shiur, if not the next one, but the one after. Very loaded topic. I'll just give you like a quick primer. One time I was at Rabbi Ben Chaim's house for lunch on a Shabbat afternoon, and there was a bunch of people there. And all of these halachot, we were talking about these things. I don't know why it came up, but they're asking Rabbi Ben Chaim different things about questions of like this, of bread, of cake. There's a concept in halacha of pataba bekisnin, which basically is when you take bread and you make it so sweet. But let's say, for example, you add sugar, you make it into a cake. It's not. It loses the status of bread. It becomes mezonot. Okay, right? What's the difference between a cookie and a challah roll? What's the difference? It's the same flour, it's the same water, just a lot of sugar. You don't have as much sugar in bread. Some challah rolls, they make a lot of sugar. Yeah, the Rosh Hashanah ones were the ones that they stick like fruity pebbles on white chocolate and they like dip it. You don't need to dip your apple in honey. You dip your apple in your challah. That thing is like, so that thing is gonna be mezonot. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you. Say hamotzi on something else. Starting the year off straight by saying the wrong beracha on the first thing that you eat on Rosh Hashanah. Hold on. But that's in the first step. This started off as bread, right? When I baked this bread, it became bread. This toast bread is hamotzi. You're making it a second time, you have to remove the status of bread. But if from the start, I was to do the same thing, if from the start, I took the eggs and I mixed it into this batter, as you said, that's going to be mezonot from day one. That's a cookie. That's a cake. That's a piece of babka. You just made babka. You didn't make bread. You made babka. That's mezonot. Okay? So now, this is what Josh is alluding to, which we'll see coming up. There is a measurement of mezonot that if you have enough of it, if you have enough of pata babekisin, it becomes hamotzi. If you know you're going to have enough of it, it's going to become hamotzi. And so this is what I was mentioning about Rabbi Ben Chaim. We were all there. Someone was we were asking all different questions about halacha, and then someone asked a question and said, "Harav, what happens if someone's going to eat cake and right in front of the rabbi, like part of the dessert, there was a big chocolate cake, like this big, like it was like a nice size round chocolate cake, and like maybe one person had one slice, someone else had another slice, but it was like predominantly there. So the person said, like, if I want to eat this whole thing right now, do I have to say hamotzi?" And Rabbi said, "Bechavot, tevarech hamotzi achshav, tevarech hamotzi be'torah." And he told him, like, say hamotzi and eat this whole cake. And he's like, no, the Lord says, he's like, no, Torah, tevarech hamotzi be'torah. And he's like, no, I don't want to. But yeah, it's just like stuck in my brain that like big chocolate cake. If you're gonna eat that whole thing, hamotzi. If you're gonna down something, the measurements. Let's wait until we come to that. So you're right. There is a situation where you're going to be having enough French toast that you would have to say hamotzi regardless. Now, what happens sometimes? You have one slice, still mezonot. And then you say, just one more. And then you have one more. And then you say, you know what? I'll have one more and I'll skip lunch. I'll have two more. You know what? I'm going to skip lunch today. Let me have 5 more. Okay, it comes to a point where you should have said hamotzi, but you said mezonot. So what do? You could keep eating it, but you're going to have to say berakat hamazon. You still have to say berakat hamazon. So we'll talk about... No, because you already said your beracha, but you're not going to now say a second beracha because you don't need to, but because you said your beracha before. But what you will do is you'll say berakat hamazon. Stay tuned, okay? Now, guys, we learned this whole thing in Shulchan Aruch. I want to show you 2 things, and then after that, I'm going to show you ChatGPT. Okay, here we go. This is Yakut Yosef. Just going to very quickly go through. This is in Siman Kuf Samech Chet 168, so that we could conclude this topic. If someone broke a loaf of bread into pieces and boiled them in a pot that was heated on the fire, so you guys tell me, what's the rule? Took a pieces of bread, boiled them in a pot that was on the fire. What's the rule? That's case number one, which means the halacha of what beracha you say is going to be depending on the size. The halacha depends on the size of the pieces. If they, at least some of the pieces are as large as a kezayit, the proper blessing is Hamotzi and Birkat Hamazon. This is so even if they no longer resemble bread. If not even one of the pieces is as large as a kezayit, the proper blessing is Barim Mezonot and Ala Michya. Okay, etc., etc. Fine, that's the first one. Next case. If one piece is as large as a kezayit and other pieces are less than a kezayit, so you have like a mixture. So what do? The person eating should recite Hamotzi over one of the large pieces, and then he can eat all of the pieces with Birkat Hamazon. If he chooses to eat only the pieces that are smaller than a kezayit, what's the beracha? He must recite the blessing of Barim Mezonot and Mein Shalosh. So now you're going to go reverse fishing for the small pieces. You know the person who goes to the chulent fishing out for the big pieces? You're going to go inside of the chulent and you're going to be reverse fishing out for the small pieces of bread so you could say Mezonot. What? If you get a big one. Right now we're talking about the guy who's very strategic and only picks out the small ones. He could get away with just the Mezonot. No, that's the same concept. That you already started saying your beracha, you would just eat the big one, and then your after beracha would get upgraded to Birkat Hamazon. That's just like let me start off doing something right, and then like after that, hopefully he's not looking. Okay, next case number 2. Bits of bread fused together. If the bread is not boiled, but someone placed small pieces in a bowl, and they became fused together with honey or hot broth. What's the halacha? Size and appearance. Good. The halacha depends on the size of the original pieces. If they are as large as a kezayit, the blessing remains Hamotzi. If they are smaller than a kezayit, it depends on the appearance. If they resemble bread, the proper beracha is Hamotzi and Birkat Hamazon. If they do not resemble bread at all, the proper blessing is Barim Mezonot and Mein Shalosh.
Not
correct. The fused together with hot broth, but not cooking it or with some sort of honey. Okay, he says there's a complicated case of like, what if you're pouring hot soup onto it? How do you view that? I'm not going there. Next case, fried bread. Bam, ba-da-dam. Fried bread is going to be our French toast over here. And there's another type of fried bread. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this. Pita chips. Where you take the pieces of pita and they fried it. Of course they fried it. Yeah, that thing is fried. It's not just toasted. That thing is in a lot of shasarta brister bogel. That thing is fried. It's delicious because it's fried. Otherwise, it's bread. You don't say bread is delicious. Fried pita chips are delicious. The poskim debate whether or not fried fruits have the same halachic status as boiled foods. Okay, so you guys are all confident that it's the same. Poskim debate it. Therefore, if someone fries small pieces of bread in oil, and it's so small, the halacha regarding the blessing of this food is uncertain. If it's large, if it's over a kezayit, then whether it's case 1 or case 2, it's got to be hamotzi. If it's small, if it's considered cooking, it's mezonot. If it's not considered cooking and it has the appearance of bread, it's hamotzi. So in that situation, if it's small, you get into this halachic question. So, etc., etc. It is recommended, therefore, to eat such a food only during a meal after reciting hamotzi on regular bread. Pita chips, have it on Shabbat lunch. No one's going to do this. So, machloket. Well, I guess if it's bigger than a kezayit, it's going to be hamotzi. They're small. I guess it depends on if you're getting it doubled or just a single. Sometimes it's half the pita. Sometimes the end piece. That end piece, you got to rip a hamotzi on that one, the big one. I remember when I was younger, there was this place that I would go to eat to, Pita Hut, in Main Street.
It's still there.
It is. So it's gone. It's still there or it's gone? Machloket. It's the shawarma place. He's saying it's gone. He's saying it's gone. Tomer, I'm sorry, it's gone. What they would do is that they would make like shawarma sandwiches and pita. So they'd slice the top of the pita so that they could stuff it. And then they would take those tops and they would fry it. And they had it there for free in the front, right? In the front, it was there. You could just take it as part of the salad bar. What's the beracha? Now, you're going to be eating a pita bread anyway, but let's say you're waiting online and you didn't say Hamotzi yet. This is like classic. People are waiting online, just stuffing their faces on this thing until they decide they're not hungry anymore and they don't even order and they leave. That's why they closed down, right? They lost the money. What do you do with this top? This thing is fried. If it's over the size of a kezayit, it's hamotzi. If it's pachot mi kezayit, machloket. But essentially, what the Mishnah Berurah and what they say is going to be hamotzi. Now, there's one nuance. There's difference between frying in a pan and deep frying. Deep frying, everyone agrees it's like cooking because it's not any different than frying it than putting in a pot of water. You're putting in a pot of a fluid. You're deep frying. That is going to be like cooking for sure. Here, let me read it to you. Some contemporary poskim claim that the status of fried fruits is definitely the same as the boiled foods, and therefore everyone agrees that the fried bread changes its blessing. According to this, the proper blessing would be Mezonot. Deep frying is an act of cooking without question. Therefore, if someone deep fries bread, it depends entirely on the size because you're in category 1. If they are as large as a kezayit, then it's going to be hamotzi, less it's going to be mezonot. If the bread is fried in a very thin little oil, just enough to prevent it from burning, like the spray, the psst. Is that really considered frying? It's not so clear. It's just there so it doesn't burn. All the poskim agree that the bread is not considered cooked. You're just warming it up and you just go up. That's not oil. For your diets, it's not considered oil, right? If you want to have a no oil diet and you're allowed to do the psh, so it's not considered cooking either. So now we're in a situation where if it's deep fried, for sure it's considered cooking. If it's just a spray so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pot, that's for sure not considered cooking. You're just warming it. It's like basically you're using it as like a toaster oven to warm up the bread. You're not frying anything. But if there's a thin layer of oil, that's the case of a machloket. The best is to not have that situation. But if it's going to be over than a kezayit anyway, it's going to be hamotzi anyway. So if you make French toast and your pieces are large, it's going to be hamotzi. Whether you consider this or not, it's going to be considered hamotzi regardless. Okay? So no. He wants to know about schnitzel. He brought schnitzel up. It's asur. We spoke about schnitzel once. You're never allowed to talk about schnitzel again. No. Why is schnitzel with breadcrumbs not hamotzi? Because he's saying because the chicken is what matters, Shakal.
Not enough.
You're taking the bread and you're grinding it and you're cooking it. You're definitely this schnitzel is like a deep fry. Like you need you're not doing a spray. That and it's like it's so small. Each piece is less than a kezayit. So whether you consider it cooking or not, and it doesn't look like bread. So if it's case 1 because it's cooked, it's less than a kezayit, it's mezonot. If it's case 2 where it's not even considered cooking, but it's less than a kezayit and it doesn't look like bread, so it's mezonot. Okay, and if you consider the chicken the main part, then it's going to be shakal. But if your pieces, it's impossible to have schnitzel with chunks of bread. Nikki, I'm sending you back to Zoom. That's it. Nikki, strike 2. One more. And I'm gonna hold on. I need to do 2 more things. Hold on. French toast. Okay, let me do this, and I want to show you the chart. On Pesach, if someone spread a raw egg on the surface of a matzah and fried it in oil, you take a matzah sheet, put egg on it, put it in oil. You're making French matzah. This is a French matzah, right? As long as the piece of matzah is larger than a kezayit, the blessing is hamotzi and berkat hamazon. This is identical to the halacha of French toast during the year. If the pieces are as large as a kezayit, it is still considered bread. For those people who okay, fine, etc. Then he's going to talk about what happens if you fry the dough or you fry the dough. Now, we're not talking about you made bread. This is going to the next point. This is all because you baked the bread and then you're trying to remove the status of bread. You follow these categories. But if you didn't bake it yet and you're putting it in the dough and you make it very oily and sugary, the law changes. I took all of the Mishnah Berurah text. I took the text of Shulchan Aruch and Mishnah Berurah. I pasted it into ChatGPT. I said, make me an infographic of this law And look what it did. Okay, let me share my screen. And this, my friends, is going to be the thing that makes us not have to think anymore. Okay, here we go. Hold on, let me get rid of this. The laws of Chavitza, Shulchan Aruch or Achaim, and this is all correct. Chavitza, what is Chavitza? So look what they did. They took a piece of bread and they broke it up into crumbs. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. Chavitza is equals to breadcrumbs or bed pieces that have changed their form. So to determine the beracha, ask, was it cooked? That's case one. Was it stuck together? That's case two. Does it still have the appearance of bread? That's also for case two. Case number one, breadcrumbs that were cooked. This is 1, 2, and 3 of Mishnah Berurah. Case number one. So if each piece contains a kezayit, hamotzi. If no piece contains a kezayit, mezonot. Even if it still looks like bread, once it was cooked and there is no kezayit, it is treated like a cooked dish, mezonot. That's case number one. Very simple. Okay? Case number two is not cooked, but the pieces are joined together by honey or soup. Not in the pot, but in your dish. Look, they don't put a pot, they put a bowl. This is a pot, this is a bowl. It's amazing. Okay? So if each piece contains a kezayit, it's beracha Mezonot and Hamotzi. Hamotzi beracha Mezonot. If the pieces are small that there's no kezayit, but it still has the appearance of bread, Hamotzi beracha Mezonot. If it's no kezayit, no appearance of bread, that's Mezonot and halachic. Appearance of bread means it is recognizable and clearly identifiable as bread. Okay, good. It's already saying, hey, you're going to ask me what is the definition of appearance of bread? Let me tell you. Amazing. That's this little information that they have here. Case number 3 of the Mishnah Berurah, as graphified by ChatGPT. I'm having issues here. Okay, it is not cooked and not joined together, only finely crumbed. Like I said, you're breaking it into crumbs. Even if the crumbs are as fine as a flour, and even if there's no kezayit and no appearance of bread, hamotzi, it's ground bread. That's bread. Okay, let's see what else they have down here. Quick rule to remember. They're going to tell you how to remember it. If it's cooked crumbs without a kezayit in each piece, mezonot. Joined by liquid without a kezayit and still looks like bread, hamotzi. If not, mezonot. Dry crumbs alone, hamotzi. Okay? Oh! To recite, then they're throwing in a small detail down here that to recite Berachot Hamazon, you also have to eat the minimum obligation. They're saying, go see Siman Kuf Pedal. I didn't even ask it for this. But it's telling me you're in Siman Kuf Samechet for Berachot Hamazon, you need to learn Siman Kuf Pedal. We're going to I think we already learned that. But I think we already learned that on Daf Chaf, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, and then they threw in my name there. And I put a pen there. I put a pen with a quill. Unbelievable. Really, like, I spent time learning the Mishnah Berurah, going back and forth, looking at Shulchan Aruch, trying to wrap my mind about the different cases, all of this, paste it in the chat, and then it just does this. It's really amazing. Don't use this as a crutch so that you don't think. I think this is the best way to do it. We spent the whole time, we learned it, we read it, we spoke through the cases, we understand it, and now you have a beautiful graphic to remember it. I think this type of thing is amazing, and I have a lot of these types of graphics, but don't let this replace you doing the work, because if you do, then you're never gonna really use that muscle. So Baruch Hashem, quick recap. Chavitza, yeah? Go ahead, ask a question, quick.
Case that we're saying, piece of bread, dry piece of bread. That's not crouton. Because the croutons
No, let's talk. Okay,
cooked again.
very good. So let's talk about how croutons are made. If you buy, there's different types. There's those little yellow croutons that are called croutons. That thing is artificial. That's mezonot. Yeah. What about if you take little pieces of bread, and you'll buy this pack, a pack of croutons, and you could see it looks like it's toasted bread. What? Yeah, it's like toast. So, if that is toasted pieces of bread, what is that? And less than a kezayit. Yeah, they're all less than a kezayit, little cubes. It looks like bread, but okay. So this is what I said. Toasted. What is toasting? Toasting is just baking for longer. You're just leaving it in the oven for longer. You're putting it in a different oven. This is just furthering the baking process. What you're doing is you're making burnt bread. That's hamotzi. If you buy a pack of, if you take bread and toast it, that's hamotzi. If you're adding seasoning to it, you're frying it, you're adding rosemary, and you put it in something to add some oil, and you like do this, which very often like the garlic bread type of thing. Although garlic bread is so large, but if you make it like oily and you add different things and you're cooking it a second time, that could become mizonot. So the answer of if you're buying croutons, what is the if you're buying those croutons, you really have to know what the process is. And if the process is simply just toasting bread, that's hamotzi. You're just making a toasted bread. But if there's a recooking process where they're adding new ingredients like oil, like different type of things to mix it up to make something else, which I think what they do is they take it on a pan and they roast it and they drizzle it with oil. That's not oil to prevent it from sticking. Like that's like getting cooked into it. That's like a cooking process. So now that falls under case 2, less than a kezayit has. I'm sorry, that's case 1. You're right. I'm sorry. Case 1 is getting cooked. You're exactly correct. You're back in. You're back in. You got an extra strike for yourself. Since you're like frying it almost, you're putting the oven with oil. Case number 1, the pieces are less than a kezayit. It becomes mezonot. So you throw those croutons into your soup or your salad. That's a mezonot. Say it again. The appearance doesn't matter for case number 1. Okay. French toast. Hate to break it to you, hamotzi. Hate to break it to you, hamotzi. They say what the beracha is on top of it, the Jewish brand. I feel like every Jewish product, I mean, if it's a kosher product that there is a like Hebrew with a rabbi writing that it's kasher on it, I feel like they should say the beracha there. Like you know what's in there. Tell me what the beracha is. The thing is, there's just so many machloket, they don't even want to get involved because like there could be like 4 different berachot. But I feel like if it's clear, in my opinion, you should say what the beracha is.
His view.
He should say that what he said. Okay, let's see. Kosher croutons.
That oats are not shiva shalom. It's not.
Nikki,
It's not how
Nikki, don't go there. Don't go there. We're not going there. Yes, I know what you're talking about. Snacking on pita chips or bread croutons. What's the bracha? Wow. Okay, look at that. Look at that. Is that bread? Straight up bread. Straight up bread. Oh, pita chips. Indulging in a quick nosh, crunch on the go, and not interested in watching for Hamotzi? It's a commercial. Are pizza chips and bread croutons similar to noshing on a pretzel or a cracker, or is washing hamotzi and breadcrumbs necessary? You may be surprised to learn that there is a quick nosh that actually requires hamotzi. Wow. Threw in the ad right then. When these products are made, they are first produced as regular bread. They are cut into smaller pieces, seasoned with spices and oils, and baked a second time. Rabbi Belsky was of the opinion that their bracha remains hamotzi. Other prominent poskim, such as Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, were of the opinion that being that the original intention was to turn them into a snack, the bracha is mezonot. Everyone agrees that if the croutons are added to boiling soup, case number 1, or made into stuffing and cooked, the bracha would be mezonot. So he says, basically he's saying how, in this case, where it's a machloket, where Rabbi Belsky is saying that actually, this wasn't bread that turned into a crouton. Like this is how they make the croutons to begin with. The commercialized pita chips are not bread that turned into pita chips. They're like pretzels. It's just like this is how they get to that stage. What I spoke about a Pita Hut, that's bread that turned into like a pita chip. But commercialized, Rabbi Belsky is saying like this. So you see it's a machloket. It's really a machloket. Rabbi Belsky is going to say this is going to be mezonot. Let me just end up with one thing of what this case, I was talking about this with Rabbi Mikey. Rabbi Mikey Levy just told me this case, how it used to be that like you want to go to the store and you want to buy meatballs. And like depending on like what the situation was, I think he was saying there's a situation where in Israel there was a part where meat was expensive. So they were taking their ground meatballs and mixing it with bread. They were taking like bread, stuffing inside the meatball. So now you go and you buy a meatball. It's a nice meatball, but really on the inside you just have bread. It's like it's like cheating. But the question is, what's the beracha? If you know that this is what they're doing, what's the beracha? It's bread, no? They're taking bread.
She didn't know that's what they're doing.
Okay, now you found out. You found out you do it. What's the beracha?
It's gonna be cooked after both of them.
Very good. Meatballs stuffed with bread to make it cheaper. You want to just go less with the meat, so you stuff it with bread. They would take bread, they would take their kebet, like their meatball, and they would stuff it with meat. So now it looks like a meatball, but on the inside, it's bread stuffed meatball. It goes into the pot, you cook it. What's the beracha? Depends on the size of the bread. Depends on how stingy you are. If you're so stingy that you put so much bread, it becomes hamotzi. If you like have less bread and more meat, it stays mezonot. That's what it ends up being. But you guys learned the rule.
Like it's around the meat. I don't know what they make the ball.
Let's say they take the piece of meat, the bread, and they like stuff it in the middle. That's the case.
Thin layer of meat.
Right. This is the case that I'm defining. Meaning, of course, there's situations where it's not going to be like that. But this is the case we're defining. All right. So we learned a lot tonight. We learned about the din of a chavitza, siman kuf samachet. And we learned really this is the din of a French toast. Yeah. Last thing. Okay. So with the pita chips, it goes back to if you're recooking it with oil and you're adding an ingredient to it, and you're not putting like a small amount of oil just so that it doesn't stick. You're not spraying it. You're actually putting oil on this thing, like drizzling it with oil that it gets absorbed and seasoning. It's like being recooked. So recooking it now it's going to depend on how big they are. If it's bigger than a kezayit, you would say hamotzi. Applying heat unless you're just like, if you're leaving bread, if you take bread and you put it back in the toaster as is, then it's just toasting bread. That's not considered cooking it again. So you need to have something else like a fluid, either with water or with oil. And even the oil is machloket. Deep fried oil is considered cooking. A spray is not cooking. Putting a little bit of oil is machloket.
On his question, like you take a piece of bread and drop it in the water for 10 seconds and pull it out, cook it.
If it's on the pot,
The water's boiling.
yeah. That's another way to do it. A guy wants bread, doesn't want to say hamotzi, just boil a pot of water, just go to your kettle and go scoop it up, and now your kettle has become chametz. Usually when you have kettles, we say for Pesach, you could use it because no one puts anything in there except for water, except for you lazy bum. You don't want to say hamotzi, and you made your kettle chametz.
Baking a big bread and putting it instead of oil and rosemary and whatever spices you're putting on pita bread. But I'm baking it from the stove.
Different rule. That's going to be the rule of pata babekisnin. When you're talking about in the dough, you put in these different ingredients. The law is different. Sorry. So what we're going to see that we're not up to there yet. We're not up to pata babekisnin yet. There's what makes Chavitza unique is that you took bread and you cooked it a second time, or you put it in a soup a second time. You changing the form of bread, and bread is defined as something that has been baked. But if you're doing it to dough is not bread. Dough is dough, and if you add things at that stage, the law will be different. Stay tuned. We're going to see. For this, baking or cooking, so baking bread a second time is not going to change the status of bread. It's like considered toasting. So that's like, yeah, exactly. So if you're doing it in the oven, it could be considered like cooking. It's just you're cooking it in a thin sheet instead of cooking it in a pan. But it's still you're putting the oil there. You're making it oily, so that's considered cooking because there's a fluid involved. The fluid happens to be oil, not water. But that's not just baking, right? We're defining what we're saying. You're not just taking, if you take a piece of bread, put it in the oven, take it out, now you have bread, and you put it back in the oven. You don't say it lost the status of bread. It's still bread, just toasted bread. Okay, gentlemen, Azak Baruch, have a great night. We'll continue next week.